So what we're going to do here is go over an important element of CSS, which is the ability to enable items to just float, which means they fill in the space. If the size of the browser window moves, then they'll float to the left or float to the right. If things move, as we get in later with JavaScript, if we start to move items, remember how we can make an item hidden or have its display equal none? Well, then there's space there that needs to be filled. Also, with some of those positioning things we talk about, remember we say that if it's absolute or if it's fixed, then the browser, where we place elements, the other elements on the page ignore the space there. So what we want to do is learn how floating works. And I've gone to the W3 Schools site, and just to show you here, it has a list of different images. And if I click on remove one of the images, you're going to see that this image that was here floats over and fills in this space. If I take this image and I click, this is using some JavaScript that we'll learn in the next lesson, next class rather. I click that and it floats over and takes over that space. So what we're going to do here is, okay, so what we want to do here is I have my page, I put in a bunch of text here so that we can play around with it, but I'm going to click Save Web Page, and you can see here I have a paragraph, and then I have an image here, and then right after the image there's a bunch of other text. So what I want to do is show how I can take this image and have it float. So rather than just show up where it needs to in the code, right? It's here's the paragraph, and then here's the image, and then there's the code. I want to show how I can make that float. And you're going to see what that looks like. So I'm going to take image, and I'm just going to put float to the right. So now what that's going to do is it's going to take it here, and rather than place it on the left, it's going to float and be sort of in line with the text. Watch. So you can see here that I've made it now that it's sort of more in line with the text. It just floats over to the right, and then the rest of the text fills in the space. And you can see how that can be valuable if you're putting in text and you want to have images interspersed within the text. Now we can also do straight positioning, and we could put it in the middle of the text, or we can do all sorts of things. But that's the first thing I want you to do, is I want you to put an image in the middle of text and have it float. Now let's say that we want to make that a little bit more formal, and we want to give that a caption or a border. So let's come in here, and let's say that we want to change that, and we want to say instead we want to do a div tag, and let's call that, let's do this as a class, like a text box, okay? And we want to give it a border, so do a 1 pixel border rather, and we're going to have that float to the right, okay? And then we'll just put our image in there. So we're going to do a div class text box, and then we're going to click Save and Show Web Page. Why did that not border? Div class text box. Oh, I didn't put color. Black and solid. Okay, so I created that, and it just fits with the image. But now we know enough about things like, let's say we want to have padding equals 10 pixels. Okay, that'll make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so now that looks a little bit better. And if I want to, I could put in, after that, let's say I'd say, we love CSS as the text, right? So that kind of shows as like a caption. Now you can do alignment and all that stuff, and we'll talk about that later. So that's one piece. And if I want a greater margin, remember how we can do margins on the outside so that it has a little bit more space? So let's create a margin here of, let's say 5 pixels, just to give it a little bit more space. All right? So now, but this shows up, and what I've done is I've created something that floats. Now I also want to show you how you can do things with, say, images, and I'm borrowing some of this stuff from the W3C schools. I'm borrowing actually a bunch of their images. So I'm going to take these images that I grabbed from W3C, and first let's put it in here. And I'll have this, if you want to just copy these images, you can grab them off of the sample code. So we're going to edit this, and I'm going to put these images down here at the bottom of the text, and obviously they'll just sort of show up, right? But you'll notice I created each one with a class of thumbnail. Now right now we don't have a class of thumbnail. I'm going to add that later, but first I want to show you what this looks like. So you can see here it just takes them, and each image is there on the page, but there's no real formatting along these lines. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take a thumbnail. What was my thumbnail thing? I'm going to create a thumbnail rule, and the thumbnail rule is going to give some form and function to these different to these images. So we're going to put that here. Now they're all floating to the left. I'm getting a common width, a common height, and a common margin, so they're going to look a little bit more systematic. Okay, so they're all the same height and width, and they have some space in between them. But what really is cool about these, and we can't really do it here on this particular page, is if I took one out through JavaScript, or if I resized the page, then they're not going to stay there. They're going to start to float downwards and fill in the space. Okay, I can't do that on this because this is what's called a frame. Well, you've already learned about frames. This is a frame, and so I can't really resize that, but we can see how that will work. And you can use a float left or a float right. In this case we did a float right. In this case it floats left. So if I had JavaScript here and I just clicked on this or clicked on this one and removed it, they would disappear. All right. So what I want you to do is follow the assignment to the right and just experiment with floating, whether it's an image float or whether it's a div float. And we're going to play around with some floating also when we do a navigation bar to see how that will work. All right.